Go for it. Wonderful. Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me here. It's a real pleasure to be at sort of Les Mills HQ, and obviously, hopefully, you're enjoying your gut week so far. Early in the week, Tuesday. But obviously a lot of things to go through the week, so it's a real pleasure for me to be talking to you about your gut, where health starts this morning. And so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Ben Warren. I'm a clinical nutritionist, so I have master's degree in nutrition amongst some other qualifications. I'm clinical director of the BPO Health Clinic, so at the BPO Health Clinic, it's probably the largest natural health clinic in New Zealand. We do a lot of, the program I oversee is called the VLP program, which is a program we do a lot of intensive sort of pathology testing, looking at what's going on in people, a lot of stuff around the gut and things like that, and some of that stuff I'll share with you today as we go through this. But it's not uncommon for us to do at least 60 blood tests when people come in, so 12 to 14 vials of blood, and then we're looking at all the major metabolic pathways within the body. So there's no hiding. If somebody has something wrong with them, we will find it, and then we start using those biomarkers to then track their health, and then we obviously look at implementing diet and lifestyle factors to reverse those parameters and improve metabolic pathways for optimal expression of health. And so it's a real fun area, and for us a large part of where we work is around the gut. And so for me, I never intended to be a nutritionist. I always intended to be a golfer, which is, I know, strange. So I'm originally from North London. I was a very good golfer out of North London, and got a scholarship to the University of South Carolina on a golf scholarship to go play golf and represent a university, and studied experimental psychology as my undergrad degree. Met my wife, who's a Kiwi, so I'm kind of like a souvenir from her OE that she brought me back to New Zealand. So very thankful for that. I had a very bad back injury even at that stage coming out of university, so I tried to go pro and missed my tour card by a shot, which was devastating, and became a professional golf coach. So I was a professional golf coach for 2 or 3 years. And it was as a professional golf coach that something happened that changed my life and changed the direction of my life that led me to nutrition. And I was on a course learning about optimal joint mechanics, and a lady just looked at me on about the 3rd or 4th day of this course and said, "Ben, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I can see you've got a bad back." And I was like, "Oh yeah, how do you know that?" She went on to say, "I've got, you could see a twist in my pelvis, scoliosis in my spine. I had one shoulder higher than the other. And when I was swinging the golf club, my transverse abdominal muscle wasn't firing at all. And I had no support for my back, and it was probably trashed." Now, I knew most of that. I was working with an All Blacks physio. I had an osteopath, chiropractor, massage therapist. And then she went on to tell me that it was probably driven by a food intolerance and that it was probably dairy, which shocked me. And being very scientific in my thinking, I was like, well, that's fine, and how does that work? And she started explaining how when you have problems in your digestive system, you start shutting down the muscles that are on the same nerve innervation from the spinal segments. And she was guessing it's dairy because I didn't breathe very well through my nose, and my head had migrated forward so I could breathe better through my mouth. So my posture back then was pretty much sort of like that, so it's probably pretty obvious. And so very scientific in my thinking, so I'm like, great, surely there must be a test I can take for that. And she's like, well, yeah, you need to do an IgG and IgE, ELISA test that goes to America. Back then it cost about $400, going back about 15 years now. And I'm like, great, I want one of them, please. Where can I get them? She goes, I can organise that. So I got the test done, and a number of weeks later, the test came back that I had a very severe food intolerance to whey protein, which is a protein that's obviously found in dairy products. Eliminated whey protein, I went in dairy products. And my back didn't get better straight away, but what started happening very quickly was, for the first time in my life, I flattened my abdominal wall, which my whole life, I'd basically looked like I drank a dozen beers a day my whole life. Like, one of my earliest memories was having a tummy out here, in the bath next to my brother, and looking down and having a tummy out here, and I'd just always been bloated. And then my asthma, after a few weeks, my asthma mysteriously just disappeared and has never come back. And I had bad asthma as a child and as an adult, and I was just like, this is incredible that what you eat can have this kind of effect on your health and how you think and feel. And so I went and retrained through one of the top health and performance institutes in the world, the Czech Institute in California. Some of you probably heard of Paul Czech. And then ended up doing a master's degree in nutrition. And at the moment, I'm doing a PhD through Canterbury on nutrition, genetics, and mental health. So that's a real area of interest for me. So when we start looking at the gut, we start looking at, you know, this essentially this tube that's 20 to 30 feet long with different sections within the tube. A lot of people say that this is the key to your health, and I'd certainly agree with that. And there's a couple of reasons why people say it's the key to your health. And the first reason is this is where you break down the foods into the base nutrients where you could absorb them so you can rebuild your body. So if this system's not working very well, you're not going to be absorbing nutrients very well. And if you're not absorbing nutrients very well, you're not going to be rebuilding the 75 trillion cells that make up your body very well. The second reason why people say this is the key to your health is because 80% of your humoral immune system, so that's 80% of your immune system that protects you from the outside world, is located in your digestive system. So 80%. 100% of the T regulatory cells that regulate your immune system are located in the digestive system. So your digestive system is the home to your immune system. And the reason being for this is our greatest surface area of exposure to the outside world is actually not our skin, it is actually our intestines. So if you look at your skin, the surface area of your skin's maybe a couple of square meters. The surface area of your digestive system, particularly the small intestine, is 20 to 30 square meters. So it's like 2 to 3 tennis courts if you unfolded it. So it's got a huge surface area. And the reason it's got these folds, they're called villi, and is to increase the surface area so you can maximize the absorption of the nutrients and the foods that you've been eating. And so it really is the key to your immune system. So whenever you eat any food, your body and your body's immune system is looking at those foods, and your body has to decide whether those foods are a virus or whether they're food, and particularly protein. So your body will look at those proteins and go, is that protein food, or is that protein a virus or a bacteria? Because viruses and bacteria are proteins too. So your body has to differentiate with all the foods you're eating whether is that food or should I attack it. And so what we're seeing, so let's jump straight into a very common food that a lot of people are eating, which we know is causing a lot of immune responses, and I'll talk quite a bit about it as we go through today, is gluten. So for 70% of light-skinned people tested, and it's light-skinned people because the labs in America and African Americans genetically are much better suited to eating gluten than light-skinned American, but 70% of light-skinned Americans, when they eat foods that contain gluten, their immune system is tagging gluten as an invader, essentially tagging it as a virus, and then they're getting some kind of immune reaction to that. Okay, and so this then has far-reaching effects way beyond the gut. So what then starts happening is something called intestinal inflammation or leaky gut syndrome. So this is when the junctures in your intestines, they get loose, and then half-digested foods can get into the bloodstream and cause an elevated immune response. So it starts off with this intestinal inflammation, which leads to then nutrient malabsorption, and then you get an elevated immune response. For a lot of people, they have gastrointestinal issues, multiple food intolerances, so they may well get diarrhea, acid reflux, they'll get bloating, okay, gas production, and then that can then lead on to an upregulation of the immune system and the pathogenesis of autoimmunity. So in the clinic, we found that 80 to 90% of people who present with autoimmunity, that's coming from their digestive system. So I'll give you an example of this. We've just had a fantastic result regarding an 11-year-old. So this 11-year-old, her name's Genevieve. She basically, at 18 months old, when she was walking and was going, ow, 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 when she was walking. And her parents were like, something's wrong. So ended up at Starship, and she got diagnosed with reactive juvenile arthritis. So an autoimmune arthritis where her body's immune system was attacking her joints. And so since that time, she's had 11 specialists. She's been on Starship. She's gone through times when she's had to inject herself with cancer medications like methotrexate on a Friday, but then she wouldn't be able to eat until Monday. And so when she came to see us about 18 months ago, we were actually so confident that we could reverse this condition in her that we got a film crew down from Auckland to film her before we actually started. And it was quite interesting because pretty much the whole film crew were in tears listening to this 10-and-a-half-year-old story. And so great news, it's common in my mind right now because just last week we signed off on her, and so she's been in remission for 6 months. She's been pain-free for 6 months, no medications for 6 months. When we interviewed her beforehand, she just wanted to be able to play sport. That's all she wanted. She didn't want to be an Olympian. She just wanted to be able to play netball. All right, and so now she can do these things without pain. How did we do that? We did that primarily just by getting her gut working really well. So we found that she had major immune responses, especially to gluten. She had pathogenic bacteria that were living within her gut that was driving a lot of these problems. So we went in, corrected all of those, rebuilt the immune system, and at the moment she's in fully remission. So it's exciting, and so it has the ability to help a lot of people. And so a lot of people have gut issues that they don't even realize is a gut issue. So when we start looking at this, leaky gut really affects the whole body. So it affects your sinus and your mouth. So if you have a dairy intolerance, for a lot of you, your body will dump out the antigens in your sinus tracts and give you a blocked up nose. And so you can have a quick breathe in through your nose. You should be able to breathe through your nose if you haven't got a cold. And if you find that invariably you can't breathe through your nose, that's probably a good indicator that the dairy is not going to be going well for you. All right? So it can definitely then, your body will start tagging proteins that look similar in your body, and it can lead to rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, these kind of things. Has a big effect on your adrenal glands, which make your daytime hormone and energy production. So it leads to fatigue over time. Obviously, there's the direct responses in the bowel, in the colon, constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel disease, even Crohn's. All of these aspects are, major association with inflammation within the digestive system. Far-reaching effects as well, far-reaching effects into your thyroid, so conditions as Hashimoto's, Graves' disease. So these are autoimmune thyroid conditions. We've reversed a lot of people with underactive thyroids, and every case of underactive thyroid we've ever seen, gluten has been a problem, okay, in all of those cases. And then it affects your skin because essentially your liver gets overloaded, and then these toxins will then start spilling out through your skin. So these immune molecules will start coming out through your skin, and you'll see things, acne, rosacea, eczema, and psoriasis is autoimmune. And then you'll also, where my area of interest very much is around then depression, anxiety, ADHD, and massive association with mental disorders. And so it has so literally what you eat directly affects how you think and feel. When you start looking at the gut-brain axis, the gut-brain axis is a three-way intersection between your brain, your gut digestive system, and the microbiome, so the bacteria that live within your digestive system. So I know you've just been enjoying a bit of kombucha, which is fantastic. So you've been supporting that microbiome, and we're going to talk about that going forward. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to roll into some my 10 top tips to really get your gut working as well as possible. All right, and start building out around this. So when you start looking at your digestive system, what we're looking at here is your autonomic nervous system. It's got two branches, your parasympathetic and sympathetic. So your relaxation response is your parasympathetic, your stress response is your sympathetic. Now the thing that I would like you to notice is that this vagus nerve, the nerve innervation, it supplies, which is on the parasympathetic side, it supplies the flow of your saliva, so your ability to break down those foods. It controls your peristalsis and secretion of pancreatic enzymes, and it controls and stimulates the release of bile to be able to break down the fats. So all of your digestive system is on your kind of parasympathetic or being relaxed side. So if you're stressed while you're eating, you're not going to be able to break down the foods you're eating. All right? So now it's very difficult, to just relax. So if I say to you right now, okay, go ahead and relax. I mean, some of you look pretty relaxed already, actually, but if I say to you, go, it's very difficult to then, unless you train through meditation and things like that, to go instantly into that relaxation response. So one of the best ways to go into this relaxation response is through breathing, because you can control your breathing, and your breathing has a direct control on your autonomic nervous system. So I'm a huge fan of diaphragmatic breathing. All right, so I'm sure most of you know how to diaphragmatically breathe, but for those you don't, you can just pop your hand on your tummy, one hand on your chest. You'll need to sit forward, just sit forward in good posture. So you can go ahead and do this, and we're just going to go ahead and have a breathe into your tummy. So as you breathe in, the tummy should go out. So you breathe in, tummy goes out, and then as you breathe out, you got it, tummy goes in. So we're going into this yoga type breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. What that does, that brings your nervous system down, which then when you're eating is going to very much help you break down the foods. So top tip number one is going to be breathe into your stomach when you're eating. And so I had one client who came to me for weight loss. She was a mum of 3 children, and her diet was pretty good. She was just trying to lose like 4 or 5 kilos. And her diet was pretty good, exercise was very good, and we just couldn't get her to lose that last 4 or 5 kilos. And I was like, well, I wonder what's going on here. And I said to you, are you fairly relaxed? Because she seemed very relaxed whenever I saw her. And she goes, I'm most relaxed when I come and see you, because that's my time out of the week. And I'm like, okay. And some of you probably get that regards to exercise. That's their time out when they come and see a personal trainer or do a fitness class. And so I said, well, when's your most stressful time of day? And she goes, oh, when I'm cooking dinner. I've got 3 children under 5. I'm cooking dinner. There's all carnage in the background. And by the time I sit down to eat dinner, I'm just so stressed that I'm not even hungry. And so all that we got her to do was to breathe into her stomach when she was stirring the pots. That's all. I'm like, well, this week what we're going to do is get you to breathe into your stomach while you're stirring the pots. And that's what she did. And she lost 2 kilos that first week. Didn't even change her diet, okay? Because she was stressed while she was eating, so she was shutting down all of her nervous system. So, yeah, it really does, puts an end to dashboard dining, like eating in the car and on the run. The next tip I really would like to give you is chewing. And around chewing, how many times do you think the average number of times people chew is? Have a guess. 5 is a great guess. It's 4 times. Okay, so if you're not chewing correctly, you're not going to be able to get the saliva around the food. There's enzymes in the saliva that you're not going to get around the food, so it's going to be much harder for your body to break that food down. And so we want people to chew more, ideally chew till liquid. Now, I'll be honest with you, out of all the things we recommend, that is the hardest thing to do. To chew to a liquid. Having said that, it is incredible again for weight management, and the reason being is because the hormones that control your sense of satiety, ghrelin and leptin, it's work on a feedback loop. So if you eat really quickly, those hormones don't kick in, and then we tend to overeat. Okay, and we've all got a good example of this. You go to a restaurant, order a meal, you eat the meal, regular pace, average 4 chews per bite, and then waiter or waitress comes up and goes, would you like some dessert? And you go, oh, yeah, got a bit of room. Have a look. So, so you order dessert, but when a dessert comes 10, 12, 15 minutes later, you're actually stuffed. And then you go, oh, but it looks so good, and I pay for it, so you eat it anyway, right? And it really helps with weight management from that aspect. I had one gentleman who lost 20 kilos in 10 weeks and I changed his chewing. That's all I did. Changed his chewing. And so it was funny because I caught up with him after 4 weeks, and I'm like, how are you going? He's like, he's doing great, and he was losing a bunch of weight already. And I'm like, he goes, there's one problem is I can only eat about 1/3 of the steak I used to be able to eat. And I'm like, oh yeah, why is that? And he goes, well, my jaw's sore and I'm sick of chewing. And I'm like, well, that's perfect. That's probably about the amount you should be eating. Okay, so top tip number 2 is going to be chew until liquid. And like I say, that's not easy to do, but the more you can work on that, relaxing and chewing is going to really help your digestive system. So then the food comes down into your stomach. And so your stomach is where your body makes and releases hydrochloric acid. It's a very strong acid. It gets down to a pH of 1.5 to 2. Very, very strong to break apart the proteins into these amino acids for your body to be able to use later. So a lot of people with stomach issues are traditionally going to have things like indigestion, heartburn, acid reflux, these kind of aspects. And so 80% of people who present with these kind of conditions are often put on medications like Losec or omeprazole or proton pump inhibitors to reduce the amount of acid that they have. So we know that 80% of people who present with these conditions actually haven't got strong enough stomach acid. Okay, so what that means is this valve at the bottom, this pyloric valve, will only open when the pH gets very, very strong, 1.5 to 2. Now, if you've only got pH of 3, this valve doesn't open, and then the food sits in the stomach for too long, and it can burble up and give you acid reflux. So there's a couple of things that you can do to see whether this is you or not. And so next time you're getting these symptoms of acid reflux, what I'd like you to do is literally have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and it's either going to make you worse or it's going to make you better. Okay, now if it makes you better, then we know you haven't got strong enough stomach acid, and we need to support the stomach acid, and so doing that regularly is going to help. And if it makes you worse, well then you just take some bicarbonate soda to alkalize the stomach acid, or over-the-counter pharmacy medications to neutralize that acid, because you do actually know you already have plenty of acid. And if that's the case, you've got plenty of acid, it's often the case that this valve's not working correctly, and that's often the case that valve's not working very well or correctly because of a food intolerance in the small intestine. Okay, so then you have to sort of look further down in the tube. Now, if you've got a problem anywhere in this tube, you're going to have problems elsewhere. So I had an example of this. I had a 14-year-old come into my clinic with really bad stomach ulcers. She'd just come back from Hamilton and the gastric specialist and endoscope, and she had stomach ulcers. She was on Losec. And so came in to see me as a nutritional consult, and one of my first questions I like to ask people always is, how are your bowel movements? You got lucky getting in here, by the way, without me asking that. So how are your bowel movements? And the mother was instantly like, oh, she really struggles in that department once every 7 days. And it's quite common. And I'm like, okay, well, I instantly started thinking the tube's full. Like as soon as she eats, she gets acid reflux no matter what she eats. Well, the food can't go anywhere. And so it's full. And so anyway, we got her bowels working. She had a food intolerance that was driving that, so we eliminated that. Got her bowels working, got bowel movements daily, and the ulcers just disappeared. Well, I mean, everybody was just looking at the wrong end of the tube. They were all looking at this end of the tube, and the problem was at that end of the tube. And so if you've got a problem anywhere in your digestive system, it can back up and then affect your stomach as well. All right? But a good way to support stomach function is to start your day with lemon and water. Okay, so squeeze half a lemon in a glass of water, ideally warm water. That'll help you absorb the water faster, and then you can just drink that. And what that does, it just sets up your digestive system to, okay, the day's here, food's going to be coming, gets your digestive system up and running. Other aspects around this is to engage yourself with the food. Okay, so you've actually got to go, ooh, food's looking good, food's coming, like you got to engage your nervous system with the food. Whereas if you're sort of like watching TV and something over there, your nervous system's responding to that, it's not responding to this. And we need our nervous system to be responding to the food in order to be able to break it down. So then the food is coming down into the small intestine, and this is really where most of the nutrients get broken down. And when you start looking at the small intestine, this is where the food intolerances really occur. So how do you know if you have a food intolerance, or do you have any symptoms? The following symptoms: so low abdominal bloating, loose stools, diarrhea, belch or burp after meals, headaches within 1 hour of eating, excessive appetite, poor appetite, feel worse after eating, crave certain foods, abdominal pains or cramps. So if you have 2 or more of those symptoms, then that's a good sign that you need to improve your digestive system. Now, obviously, if you've got a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome or acid reflux, then we actually know. If you've got eczema, so if you have an autoimmune disease, again, these are all real big indicators. If you've got a medical diagnosis of these things, that there's something going on in your digestive system. So you've got to focus on the effect of the food as much as possible. So you really got to start listening to your body and seeing what response you get from certain foods. When do you get bloated? When are you bloated? Are you bloated all the time? I was bloated all the time. I was bloated for 27 years and didn't know. Seriously, I was just, because I was just always bloated. So if you're always bloated, you don't actually know any difference. And so that was for me. So it's very difficult. If you'd ask me if I had a dairy intolerance, I'd go, no, I'm not bloated. I'm just always like this. Looking at the effects of the food. So when you start looking at dealing with these food intolerances, you've really got to avoid the foods that are inhibiting a response in your nervous system. So gluten's going to be number one, dairies, medical drugs, so things like aspirin, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like Voltaren, they cause a lot of leaky gut, okay, and can drive a lot of these problems. GM foods are being isolated as being problematic. Colorings, preservatives, excess sugar, because sugar then feeds the unfriendly bacteria, which then gives us something that's called dysbiosis, which is too much unfriendly bacteria, dysbiotic bacteria. Salicylates, amines, and sulfites, invariably those are more associated with liver dysfunction. Okay, so we don't actually eliminate them. You'll know with sulfite sensitivity, if those of you who really can't handle some types of white wine, and the reason being is because they've used sulfite as a preservative. And then, so if you have one glass, then you have a massive hangover. That's a good indicator that your liver's not handling the sulfites. All right. So you want to increase the quality of the food item. So if you're having dairy, you may want to try having raw dairy, because raw dairy straight from the cow has the enzymes still intact, has the beneficial bacteria still intact, has much more B vitamin content. So it's much easier for your body to digest. If you're looking at bread, you may want to improve the quality of the bread, sort of looking at a whole grain spelt as opposed to a traditional white ciabatta, and your body's going to be able to tolerate that much better. But for a lot of people, if you have a gluten intolerance or a dairy intolerance, you've got to actually eliminate the food for a period of time. So for me, I eliminated dairy for 2 years, and then I reintroduced dairy at much lower level, raw, and I can tolerate dairy now. I have for the last 12 years, not really had any problems with dairy, okay? But certainly if I had a lot of poor quality dairy and started having a lot of it again, probably my body would start tagging that as protein as an invader, and my asthma would come back. All right, so you can control these things. So like I mentioned, BioHealth have found that 70% of white-skinned people have an intolerance to gluten. So we want to reduce your food intolerances by rotating your foods as much as possible, so ideally over 4 days. So it's a good idea to try and do this at least with your proteins, particularly dairy and eggs. So don't eat eggs every day for breakfast. Clinically these days we see a lot of people who have been on, say, like the paleo diet for 2 years because they've got digestive issues, but the paleo diet hasn't been helping them. And what we then, when we do testing on their food intolerances, they come back as highly intolerant to almonds. And the reason being they're eating almond everything. You know, they're eating almond bread, they're eating almond muffins, they're having almonds for snacks. And so they've already got leaky guts, so their immune system's then tagging almonds as an invader, and they're getting very strong reactions to almonds. So, you know, it's just simple things like rotating the nuts you're eating as your snack throughout the day. You know, have walnuts, hazelnuts, Brazils, and so that you're rotating the presentation of those proteins to your body, so your body is not tagging them as a virus. And then emotional responses to food can also set up these food intolerances, so childhood memories and food. So for me, for many years, I couldn't eat cabbage. And the reason being is one of my first memories, childhood memories, is school dinners in the UK as a 5-year-old. The dinner lady, who I still remember the name, Mrs. Plummer, tells you about it. You know, I wasn't allowed to leave the room until I'd finished my cabbage. And so, you know, every time I looked at cabbage, I thought of Mrs. Plummer. And it set up a stress response, and you know, couldn't eat cabbage. So it's not until you do sort of personal growth courses and you open the box and you lift it out and go, oh, look, there's Mrs. Plummer. And you actually sort of see what's going on. So gluten really is the big problem for a lot of people these days. And so you're probably wondering, why is gluten such a problem? Because, you know, we have definitely eaten it, you know, a lot. Our grandparents ate a lot of it. So I'll explain why, but first of all, let's look at, is gluten safe for non-celiac? So in this study, they were looking at the safety of gluten. So there's a spectrum of intolerance to gluten. At one end of the spectrum, you have people who are a celiac. They have a severe immune reaction to 20 parts per million of gluten. So they ain't got a little bit of bread or a little bit of gluten-containing food. They have a severe immune reaction. So, but that's a very small percentage of the population up here. There's a whole group of people in the middle here who don't get that very severe reaction, but are still reacting to gluten. They're still building immune molecules to it. And so in this study, they were looking at, is gluten safe for non-celiacs? So they looked at the production of interleukin 15, which is an inflammatory marker, when celiacs and non-celiac individuals were basically challenged with gluten. So they gave gluten to both celiacs and non-celiacs. And so they found that gluten elicited its harmful effect through an interleukin 15 innate immune response on all the individuals with and without celiac. So it basically shows that even if you're not a celiac, everybody gets some kind of low-level immune response to eating gluten. Okay? So given that inflammation and chronic inflammation is really at the origin of many of today's modern diseases, if we can reduce this low-grade inflammation as much as possible, it's going to be good. And when you think, I know inflammation seems like a word that's out there. Inflammation, you can really talk about it as aches and pains. So at some level, when you start getting increased inflammation, you will get increased aches and pains. All right, so we can certainly see that gluten really is a problem for everybody. And so I'd like you to introduce you to Norman Borlaug. So Norman, in the 1970s, was was actually given the Nobel Prize for his life's work. And his life's work is he developed a high-yielding dwarf variety of pest-resistant wheat, which we now all currently eat. But unfortunately, what he didn't know in this hybridization process, that he'd basically concentrated the levels of lectins, which are a molecule that plants make to protect themselves from the environment. And so in making this pest-resistant, high-yielding dwarf wheat, the lectin levels in that variety are 10 to 100 times the traditional wheat. And so scientists are now studying these lectins, dietary lectins, as disease-causing toxicants, lectin-based food poisoning, a new mechanism of protein toxicity. So wheat lectins are now being heavily investigated for the increase in inflammation associated with modern communicable lifestyle diseases. So the point of this being is the bread you're eating now is nothing like the bread that your grandmother used to eat, okay, because of the dietary lectins, cause leaky gut, and then your body tags gluten as an invader, which is an indigestible protein. Okay, so we're beginning to understand the sort of pathogenesis of why this is happening. So when it comes to testing for food intolerances, there's RASP and other medical tests. They really only test an IgE immune response, so that they're testing a very strong immune response, very severe immune response. We really want to test IgA and IgG food intolerances, so they're much a lower level immune response, and they're often delayed. So just so you know, in New Zealand, medically there's no funding for testing for these IgG immune responses. They're only really funded to test to see if you're a celiac. So certainly by all means I highly recommend people get tested for celiac because it's becoming increasingly more common, but it doesn't necessarily mean to say that you're okay with gluten. All right. So a ELISA test is a test for antigens. It is quite expensive, so these days it's about $500 to do this blood test, and it only shows up if you've eaten the food recently. So there's some limitations. There's some limitations to this testing. Applied kinesiology uses your nervous system to respond, to test, to see how your body responds. We don't use this clinically. We only use gold standard medical tests in the clinic. I'm actually trained in it though. A lot of chiropractors will muscle test, okay? And a friend of mine, Dennis Tuvey, he was the head pharmacist for Tauranga Hospital. When he was 50, he got diagnosed with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and he didn't want to take any of the medications because as a pharmacist he knew the side effects of the medications and he didn't want to take any. So he went Dr. Hoppin. He ended up finding a doctor who did muscle testing. He muscle tested him and found he was deficient in boron and zinc, gave him boron and zinc, and his ME went into remission. Okay, he's now like 14 years later, he's written a book about it. He then basically didn't want to be a pharmacist anymore, and is a big advocate for natural health. And so applied kinesiology can be very, very useful. All right. Pulse, you can even just take your pulse and take measurements before and after you've eaten the food. And what you're going to be able to do is, if you're having a severe immune response to that food, your pulse will go up. You'll have a stress response to that food. Obviously, you've got to be controlling as many variables as possible, so make sure you're just sitting down still, and you've been sitting down for a little while. But with the advent of the Fitbit and things like that, it's really easy just to have, just to check, how's my pulse doing now? Generally, a good example of this is like coffee. A coffee's going to be worth 10 beats per minute, okay, because it raises your nervous system response through cortisol. So these are good little sort of ways that you can have a look and see. So top tip number 4, obviously, is avoid gluten-containing foods as much as possible. There's plenty of gluten-free alternatives, so I'm not basically saying go grain-free, because there's plenty of buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, millet. So these sort of grains, rice, are still, they're whole grains, they're incredibly nutritious, prepared correctly, and so you can still be eating these foods, but we're really just moving away from the gluten-free foods as well. And when you start looking at your overall in regards to your diet, you want to be moving away from processed foods, obviously, minimizing processed sugar, processed grains, because they act on your body faster than sugar, so your body's able to get the sugar out of those grains faster than sugar, and then obviously moving away from gluten as much as possible. So then you can do some food elimination challenges if you have concerns around food intolerances. So the first thing to remember is you will be addicted and intolerant to your favorite food. So for those of you who love dairy and you've just got to have a piece of cheese before you go to bed, that's a good sign. Sorry, you're looking very guilty now. I'm not looking at anybody in particular. Then that's a good sign. Or you just got to have some crackers, or got to have a piece of bread with your dinner. That's another good sign that you're intolerant to that food. It's easier on your immune system to clump it up. So it takes about 4 to 7 days for those cravings to diminish. You want to eliminate suspect foods for at least 21 days. So you want to go gluten-free for 21 days, and then reintroduce the suspected food and monitor the responses. So responses to look out for are going to be around bloating, are going to be around tiredness, fatigue, racing heart, sleep issues, so then you don't sleep very well. You can even monitor, skin, how's your skin reactions and things like that. Okay, so there's a lot of bowel movements is going to be a good one to monitor. At the moment, there's some talk around that people shouldn't eliminate gluten, because when you then do get gluten, you're going to get an elevated response. And for me, I'm not a fan of that. I believe if somebody's gluten intolerant, they should eliminate it, because you don't want to get that low-grade inflamed response all the time. And when you do then eat gluten, that elevated response is actually the true response of your body to that antigen. So it's kind of like smoking. If somebody smokes every day, your body habituates to the toxins in cigarettes, and you don't cough your lungs up. But if you stop smoking for 6 months and then had a cigarette, you'd cough your lungs up, because you're seeing the true response of your body to that exposure. Another option is you can just start a juice fast or a plain food diet. Okay, so just brown rice, chicken and broths, and then for 3 days, and then slowly start introducing other foods. So you could start with vegetables, and then 3 days later add fruit, and then 3 days later start adding animal proteins like eggs, and then keep going 3 days later, legumes, and you just keep introducing foods until you get your symptoms back. Okay, so with asthma, I had a woofer, which is a willing worker on organic farms. So down in BPU, I live on a farm, and down in Hawke's Bay, and so he was only staying with us for 2 weeks, so we didn't have time to do the IgG, IgA testing, which is what we'd usually do. And so we just put him on we put him on brown rice, chicken, and some broths, and that's all he ate. And we got rid of his asthma. He'd had asthma his whole life. He was on steroids as a 21-year-old. So we were able to completely get rid of his asthma. But the trouble is he couldn't really eat any other foods without getting asthma, which is then a problem. So then we had to rebuild his system. And by that time, he was already off around the country, but that was all good. So that can be very, very useful, looking at these things. All right. So supplements and foods to improve your digestive function. Obviously, the apple cider vinegar and a tablespoon of warm water, the lemon juice, half a lemon squeezed in a cup of warm water. Aloe vera. Aloe vera is an incredible healing. Got a lot of incredible healing properties, and the aloe vera plant, there's chemicals in there that make your cells replicate very quickly, so it's very beneficial for your intestinal tract. So taking aloe vera, just often we just give it as a drink with some manuka honey, and it's very well tolerated, but I always like people, if they've never had it before, is just to test a little bit on their skin, just to make sure that they're not getting an allergic reaction, and then having sort of 5 meals twice a day, very, very beneficial for healing the intestines. L-glutamine, which is an amino acid that's the fuel that rebuilds the villi or the fingers in the small intestine, a teaspoon before bed. Colostrum. So colostrum has a lot of IgA, IgG immune factors, so it's immune intelligence from the mother and mother's milk, and that helps modulate your immune response within the digestive system. So with people with a lot of gut issues, colostrum is really beneficial. Digestive enzymes to support the digestive system, to set up the pH as well within the digestive system can be really useful. And then homemade chicken broth and bone broths. Okay, so they have a lot of gelatin in there, again very beneficial to the gut, and then also a lot of glycosaminoglycans, which are again used by fuel for healing the intestines. So huge fan. Top tip number 5 is going to incorporate broths as much as possible into your day. It's not uncommon for us to give people between 500 millilitres and a litre of broth a day. So they have to have a litre of broth a day to help heal their digestive system. So maybe later you're going to get into some broths. Moving into the large intestine. Okay, so the large intestine is the number one way we get toxins out of our body. So I don't know about you, but I've got a 5 and an 8-year-old, so poos are a hot topic in my household. So we're going to talk about the perfect poop. Should be well-shaped, consistent in contour, pass easily, light brown, smell natural, and float without needing several attempts to flush. Nobody likes the unflushable. And then when you look at poop patrol, dark and sink, that's a sign of dehydration or longer transit times. White and won't flush is a sign of excess fats. Diarrhea or loose stools, body's attempt to get rid of toxins at all costs. Foods intolerance, allergies, stomach bugs. Recognition of food particles. You shouldn't be able to go, oh, there's that blueberry muffin I just ate. You shouldn't be able to do that for 2 reasons, obviously, because you shouldn't be eating blueberry muffins, but anyway, that's a whole different conversation. So it's an indication of insufficient enzymes, poor chewing, and too short a transit time. So the food's literally just going through you so fast that you can't absorb it. So these people are often skinny, they're often fatigued because they're not absorbing the nutrition from the food they're eating. They often have a diagnosis of Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Pebbles, chronic constipation, dehydration, indication that your gallbladder is dysfunctional. All right, so there's an opportunity with this bowel movement, on a daily level to really check in and see what's going on with your digestive system. So you really want to be using this as an opportunity to see what's going on. So when you start looking at the elimination through the bowel, you really want to check your transit time. So transit time is the time in to time out. Okay, so it's the time that food is actually inside of you, and it should be 12 to 24 hours. And you can check this with corn on the cob, and beetroot's one of the best ways. So with beetroot, you just eat a bunch of beetroot, start the clock, and then when you get red in the stools, stop the clock. Corn on the cob, that's the exception to the chewing rule, so just bite and swallow, and then you get to play spot the corn. And so it should be 12 to 24 hours ideally. And so for a lot of people, Less than this, the food's not staying in you long enough to get the adequate nutrition from it. But for a lot of people, people will go, oh, my transit times are okay. But really, when we look at their transit times are 40 to 50 hours. So even though they're having a daily bowel movement, there's another aspect to having not being constipated. And for me, I like people to pass 30 centimetres of fecal matter a day, a 30 centimetre poo. I don't mind if it's 130, 215s or 310s. I don't mind how you get there. 6.5s is no good, again, it's going through you so fast. So a lot of people will say, oh, Ben, I have daily bowel movements, but I'm not getting my 30 centimetres, but I'm having daily bowel movements. And then we get them to do the transit time test, and the transit times will be 40, 50 hours. So the food's just staying in them way too long, unfriendly bacteria then really propagating heavily, and so we're getting a lot of problems. So longer than 24 hours and it's basically poisoning you from the inside out. So top tip number 6 is really to know your transit time. You really want to just know your transit time and so you know exactly what's going on. And so things to help with large intestine are obviously probiotic foods. So probiotic foods probiotics are really defined as bacteria that have been shown to have a health benefit. And so probiotic foods are foods that have these beneficial bacteria that have a health benefit. So there's in regards to dairy, there's raw milk, kefir, yogurt, and yogurt-containing cultures. If you're dairy tolerant, they're all very good. Vegetables, sauerkraut. I understand your little bird coming in to show you how to make some fermented vegetables later in the week, which is going to be fantastic. Pickled foods, kimchi, natto tempeh. In regards to grains, you've got sourdough bread. And then for probiotic drinks, you've got kefir, kombucha tea, which you've all been sampling today. It's fantastic. Now, these things are really powerful, okay? So you have to be a little careful with kombucha. So some of you are going to be having some fun over the next 24 hours, I'm afraid. So, yeah, it's all good. So a friend of mine was traveling with me on my seminars, and I'll often drink kombucha just as a nice drink at a cafe. And so I ordered a bottle of kombucha, and I didn't even think. And he was like, "Oh, what's that, man?" Oh, yes, I'll have one of them. So he had one too. And so I just drank the bottle and didn't think anything of it because I'm used to it. And he drank the bottle and he had such a die-off of his unfriendly bacteria that it basically put him in bed for 24 hours. So yeah, so if you're not used to having a lot of fermented foods, just go easy. Just start off slowly and build up. It can be a bit of fun. It's very cleansing, so it's all good. Fermented kvass or vijuvlak, so this is a fermented beetroot drink from Russia. And then Yakult, you'll be familiar with these sort of similar drinks. And then vinegar, raw apple cider vinegar. So many of you will probably be using apple cider vinegar on your salads and things, or just buy the raw one, okay? So then you're getting a beneficial bacteria whenever you're putting that on there. So top tip number 7 is going to eat fermented foods daily. All right, so traditional cultures show that they get 12 to 15 servings of probiotics every day. Why? Because they didn't have refrigerators. So they were basically having to ferment their foods, and so they were recollinating, getting all these different beneficial strains of bacteria in the gut as they were going along. And then we also want to feed these beneficial bacteria, okay? So we want to, because they need specific foods, and they need specific, usually most often specific types of fibers. So garlic and onion are probably going to be, garlic, onion, leek are going to be, beetroot, peas. So, these are all going to be very beneficial. Again, many fruits are very, very beneficial, especially. And then legumes, going to be chickpeas, lentils, kidney beans, baked beans. So we've got to be getting these foods into our diet to feed the beneficial bacteria. So it's not only the probiotic food. So for a lot of people, getting these foods is going to really help with constipation, especially with children. If any of you have children who are constipated or have slow transit times, getting these foods in are going to feed those beneficial bacteria, and that's going to be really beneficial. Nuts, cashews, pistachios, and then obviously some grains as well. All right. So there's plenty of, again, coming back to these whole foods. Yeah.
Do you rotate these foods or fermented foods like you do the proteins?
Yeah, you certainly could. If you've got a digestive issue, you can certainly rotate them as much as possible. Often with food intolerances, it's often the proteins that are the problem, and so it's most often with the proteins. So a lot of people, you don't have to necessarily rotate the garlic or the onion and things like that. It's more the proteins. It's a great question. Okay, supplements and foods for a better large intestine. So prebiotic, probiotic foods. So basically getting these into the diet, get the large intestine working better. Probiotics, actually taking a probiotic. I think we've been talking about Biocult. I'm a huge fan of Biocult, which is a 14-strain acid-resistant probiotic. Psyllium husks, for some people, that's an insoluble fiber that just adds bulk to the stool, and that can help a lot of people. But again, everyone's different. For some people, psyllium husks will block them up. Okay, so you just have to see if that works for you. Slippery elm is a herb that makes the intestines, increases the mucus secretion of the intestine, so it kind of makes everything nice and slippery and helps food move down and through. Vitamin C to bowel tolerance can be very, very good, even with magnesium to bowel tolerance as well. So with magnesium and vitamin C, when you start getting too much and you're not absorbing it, it'll attract water into the intestine and then give you a loose bowel movement. So it's quite a nice gentle way to get things moving without having to take a laxative. And then trifla, which is an Indian herb for constipation and digestive health, very, very nice just for people who generally have a slower kind of constitution around their bowel movements, always tending to have longer transit times, just to keep things moving, all right? Really, really important. So when everything else doesn't work, colonics, you sometimes have to reset the bowel, and because there can be a lot of impaction of fecal matter over years of build-up, and so then there's no surface for the beneficial bacteria to really thrive and live in. And so with that just involves colonics and flushing out the bowel, so you've got a nice clean surface to work with and get the bowel working really well. For a lot of our chronic patients, we often don't see a breakthrough in their health condition until they've done a series of colonics, and we refer them out for that, and then we'll often see a breakthrough in their condition and an improvement in blood parameters. So top tip number 8 is daily bowel movements are a must. Okay, so it's really got to happen, and for many people there's only like one time a day for this thing to happen, so you've got to schedule it to happen. You've literally got to make time in your day, because for many people, if they've missed this opportunity, that's it, it's gone. You've got to wait till tomorrow now, and so instantly at that stage you're at 48-hour transit time, which is a problem. All right. So when you start troubleshooting the digestive system, there's something called small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So this is when there's an overgrowth of bacteria literally in the small intestine. So the bacteria should primarily be in the ascending colon here, but what happens when the pH gets out in the digestive system, you'll get a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. And so these people, they'll get bloated no matter what they eat, so particularly carbohydrates. Whenever they eat any carbohydrates, even like kumara or pumpkin soup, they get bloated. Okay, so it's a good sign that they've got small intestine bacterial overgrowth. For probably a couple of you, having the kombucha is going to make you more bloated, and that's potentially because you have SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And so with this, leads to bloating whenever you eat carbohydrates. There's a urinary indican test, so there's a test that we can do to find this, and it basically requires minimizing probiotics and probiotic foods short term, using a bacterial kill agent to knock down the bacteria in the small intestine before you can then go ahead and eat those foods again. Okay, so just to be aware of that it's not just a case of everybody should have loads and loads more probiotic foods, because for some people they will make them worse. Okay. So then we start looking at yeasts and things like that. So you start looking at gut pathogens. So if you're doing all of these things already and you're still experiencing a lot of gut issues, then potentially there's going to be a pathogen in the gut. So we do the most parasitology testing of anybody in Australasia, and we find a lot of pathogens, and these things can be worms, roundworms, hookworms, pinworms. We see amoebas. We even see very dysbiotic bacteria. We've even isolated strains of bubonic plague. The lab called us from America saying we had a health emergency because we had Yersinia isolated from one of our samples. So we find some pretty gnarly bacteria in the intestines, and these people, it's often driving chronic fatigue and other issues within the individuals, or spilling over and affecting other systems. So being aware of these things and knocking them out. Everything within the digestive system, any problems, the blood from the intestines, large intestine, goes all directly to the liver. And so you often will then see liver problems. Okay, and so for liver problems for men is invariably increased belly fat. You're going to see LDL cholesterol increase. For women, it's going to be increased storage of body fat on the hips and menstrual imbalance. okay, and hormonal imbalances. The liver fails to clear the metabolites of hormones. Okay, so I wanted to give you a top tip for for your liver function, which is exercise. Okay, exercise helps clear your liver as much as anything. Okay, as any foods that we can give you, exercise is absolutely incredible for clearing your liver. All right, so I'm a huge fan of exercise for that reason. And then the proteins from the liver will spill over and start damaging your kidneys. And so I want to give you a tip for your kidney function, and that's to drink water. Okay, so I go with Dr. Batman Heilig for the recommendations on water. He's one of the top doctors in the world. So if you're 60 kilos, that's 2 litres a day. 75 kilos, 2.5 litres a day. 90 kilos, 3 litres a day. And then for every hour you're exercising, you want to be having another litre of water, ideally with electrolytes in. Okay, and so it's, this cellular hydration is really, really important. So when you start looking at your digestive system, it really, for me, is the key to your health. It's the foundation of rebuilding your body and the nutrients from your diet. It's also the key to your immune system, and it's also the key to aches and pains and inflammation. So getting the digestive system is working really well. So hopefully, you've got some good strategies with those 10 tips to get into and get into it. So what questions do you have? Any questions? You're all in shock. You're like, oh.
What kind of broths?
What kind of broths? So how do you make these broths? So basically you could just start off, if you roasted a chicken, just take that carcass and chuck it in some water with some carrots and some onions and some garlic, boil it up. Just start off by boiling it up like overnight. And then you've got a chicken stock. And so then you could either use that chicken stock, you could just take it in a thermos to work and put some Mediterranean herbs in it, or you can put it as a base for a soup and then drink it that way. And so there's a couple of ways to get it in. So that's going to be one way to make it. Bone broths are a little bit more intensive. So invariably with bone broths, you get the bones, you buy specific sort of soup bones that have been cut in half, put them in a big pot, some apple cider vinegar, and you usually boil it up for about 48 hours. Stinks out the whole house. You have to have really friendly flatmates to do that, and then you can again use that and just drink it. There's very great place in Auckland, Raw Essentials. They're actually a pet food company, but they do some fantastic broths. Great value, do really good broth. And so at Be Pure, we have accounts with them. And so, like for me, I usually order about 24 litres a month. And then for me in the afternoon, I'll just have like a big mug of chicken stock every afternoon as just like a nice warm hug in the afternoon in winter. It's lovely. And so, so there's a few different ways. On our website, bepure.co.nz, we've got how to make broths, we've got how to make sauerkraut, fermented vegetables. Sauerkraut's really easy as well. Takes a little bit of time, but you're going to get a jar like this of sauerkraut for literally a couple of dollars to make. So, whereas if you buy a jar, it's like that for like $10. So it's very cost effective to make. Yeah, good. Yeah.
My daughter's quite sinus-y.
Mm-hmm.
She had an allergy test.
Yes.
Does that have included dairy?
It will do as an allergy, but with most allergies, you're going to know if you have an allergy to a food, because as soon as you eat it, you're going to get an immune response. So like with peanuts or strawberries, people get welts and hives. With an IgE immune response, it's a severe immune response, direct. So you're generally going to know with foods anyway. So yeah, it's not testing for the IgA, IgGs, which are those lower level immune responses.
So I take it out for...
Yeah, I would definitely eliminate it.
breathing better?
Yeah, I'd definitely eliminate it for a little bit and for 21 days or so, and just monitor how she goes. Does she also like catch a lot of bugs and things? So we know her immune system's under load, and so yeah, that's.
Does that include verrucas?
So verrucas I think are viral,
Yeah.
and so and so yeah. So it's good. You can start putting all this stuff together, and you can start seeing why people's immune systems are under load and not as strong as we want your immune system to be, like a heading dog in with the sheep. So you want your immune system to be very schooled up, knows exactly when to go in, when to come back. Whereas a lot of people's immune systems, with autoimmunity, you'll see people's immune systems more like a couple of Labradors in with the sheep. So the immune system's running around just causing carnage, but it's not actually doing what you want it to do. And so then they have low-grade systemic inflammation, which then causes a whole bunch of other issues depending on their genetics. So yeah.
When you've got an issue with sulfites, are there any
Yeah.
foods that contain sulfites to stay away from?
Yeah, the main one's probably going to be the real orange apricots, dried apricots. So they're cured with sulfites. But what you can do, invariably we found people with a sulfite sensitivity are not converting the sulfites to sulfates very well, which is a liver pathway. And so we often find by giving them Epsom salt baths, which is magnesium sulfate, that helps this pathway in the liver so that they're more tolerant. I'm not justifying white wine consumption, but it just makes them more tolerant of then sulfites in their diet. And so, yeah, magnesium salt baths, so just a couple of cups of Epsom salts in the bath a couple of times a week, and that'll it increases your magnesium blood levels by 4-fold, which is very nice, helps the muscles relax for a lot of people, and then it just helps this specific pathway regarding the liver and sulfate.
And are there also sulfites in red wine?
I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Anyone know? Go to ask the audience on that one. I'm not sure around the red wine. It's my understanding that primarily they're used in the white wine because of the antioxidant levels, and it's a preservative. But I'm not sure exactly on the wine front. Very good.
Even though you talked about the lemon and water in the mornings, is the apple cider in water the same?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, for some people they don't. For whatever reason, they don't necessarily get along well with the lemons, so the apple cider vinegar goes away. And it's just really basically what you're doing is just introducing a little bit of acid into your stomach to get your digestive system fired up, and that really just helps them when you're eating, that your system's already started to get fired up, as opposed to just putting foods in and expecting it to come straight online.
And is there sort of a recommended delay between doing that and when you start eating?
That's a good point. That's a good question. So. Probably 10 to 15 minutes beforehand is going to be good. The water, we don't necessarily want a lot of water in the stomach when you're eating, because you will dilute the hydrochloric acid to a degree. And so warm water, and you all probably will know this just from experience, but warm water, your body will only absorb water out of the stomach when it gets to body temperature. And so this is why if you go to the gym and you buy a cold bottle of pump and drink it, you can then be on the treadmill and you can literally hear it sloshing around. And it's because it's got to get up to body temperature before it can be absorbed. So body temperature water will be absorbed faster, and so I kind of like a warm water with lemon juice just to get through the system a little faster. Very good. Good.
A couple of questions on that. So first one is, do you negate the effects of it if you back it up with a coffee or something?
Well, coffee's very acidic anyway. And so our systems are very robust, and really only if you've got problems in the system do you then have to start worrying about that. So our system can handle putting multiple different proteins, carbohydrates, fats in all together. So it's pretty robust. So I would say that coffee is quite acidic. So I've never seen any research around it or anything like that, but I would suspect that for most people that's not going to be a major problem. Yeah.
And then when you talk about electrolytes in water,
Yeah.
sort of natural household.
Yeah, probably elite electrolytes, which are literally they're just electrolytes, no sugar. The reason that they put so much sugar in with electrolyte drinks is because the glucose does actually help drive the electrolytes into the enterocyte into absorption, and so. But having said that, most people don't need extra sugar, and so Elite ELETE is a brand, Elite Electrolytes. I'm sure you'll be able to get them around. Okay, just grab them online. All right. Well, I think that's my time. I'm real happy to stay and answer any personal questions you may have. I just want to again thank Les Mills for having me here, and thanks Karen for bringing me down and organising all this. And just check us out at bpure.co.nz if you need any help at any time. Don't hesitate to contact us. Okay. So thanks very much. Cheers. Thank you.